Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining the webinar. Today's webinar, I'm excited to have with me once again, Justin. Justin, want to say hi to the audience?
Hello again.
So this time, Justin's going to be looking at how to measure supply chain performance using KPI tier-based thresholds. We've been covering a lot about KPIs and dashboards, and I think this is an essential topic because it really helps you figure out how to be more proactive with your metrics. So I think it's going to be very exciting to learn as well. All right, so as usual, because we have a few people that are not familiar with Arqiva, I'm just going to give a quick overview of who Arqiva is. So we are a team of data scientists and supply chain consultants, and we provide easy-to-configure supply chain software solutions that really help manufacturers improve on their existing planning processes. And along those lines, we have created a full suite of S&OP solutions that help with proactive demand planning, optimized inventory management, continuous capacity planning, optimized demand and supply synergy, and all in all, which is what we're going to be discussing today, the reporting, KPIs, and measuring all of that. And this essentially helps you create a more harmonized or synchronized S&OP process. So we're going to talk about how you can do better alerts and create a better tier-based system using Arqiva. And this is a built-in system that we have. So what the system does is it essentially helps you streamline your supply chain performance monitoring processes. We've done a webinar on this, really showing the software. Today, Justin's going to take the different approach, which is he's going to show the software, but also talk about the strategy behind it a little bit. And it really just helps you track preventative measures, which is essentially what we want. We don't want to be firefighting. We want to be able to get ahead of specific disruptions. So today's webinar agenda, what are we going to discuss? We're going to look at, what the Arqiva Pulse alerts and notifications feature is all about, and how it affects tier-based supply chain performance monitoring. So how do you go about setting up that system? What's the value of that? And how do you monitor it once you have it set up? And then we're also going to do a live demo, which is going to let you know how to do it using the inbuilt Arqiva system as well as the table editor. So Justin, the first question is, just taking a step back, what is an alert?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, the alert is going to be something that is going to be searching through your network and looking for some sort of item that you've pre-selected, right, as something that you want to dive into. So to that end, there's going to be some planning on your part to put a good alert system in place. It's going to build off of your existing suite of KPIs, your existing suite of reporting, and so really this is another step in the process. Coming from the ground level, there's going to be more work in advance to get to this point, right? It's not the first step in the process. In addition, within the system, right, our alerts through our new alert interface, they've got different levels of seriousness to them. Some of them are just simply a notification. Some of them are more in-depth than that. And so really the software covers a range of things from just periodic, cycle reviews to things where a threshold has been tripped that, has a built-in action, associated with that particular item.
All right, that's great. So I know you touched upon this a little bit, but what is the Arqiva Pulse alerts and notifications feature? What does it really do?
So this was something that we introduced in version 4.8 of the software. So for anyone listening that is on earlier versions, or you've recently gotten up to version 4.8 or something newer than that, then this tool is available to you. And so this was put into place, and the cool thing about it is it's integrated to all the modules that are already there. So whether you're in a table editor, whether you're in a quick report or a workbench, the alert system is built into what you're looking at. And it's context sensitive too. It's as you create these alerts, it knows what you're looking at within the data and what your context is. So it's easy to just right click and build yourself a little system that you can keep an eye on the particular number that you're looking at. If you're wondering if that number is going to shift, then you can put a proactive alert in there so that should it shift tomorrow or next week, you can decide, hey, I want to know about it, or I want a group of people to know about it. You can tie it to a group, and the goal is just to, like Helen said, really shift you away from fighting fires to being more proactive in whether something is moving from not urgent to urgent, and for something that's important. We'll talk about that a little bit more later.
All right. So now that we've covered what alerts is, we've talked a little bit about feature. Can you talk about what a tier-based supply chain performance monitoring system really is? What's that?
Sure. So the idea behind a tier-based system is that you're going to have an ability to escalate issues on an automated basis. So it's not necessarily incumbent upon a single person under all circumstances, right? The idea being that everyone's time is important, and so if something is a small issue, something that maybe a shift manager at the plant or someone like that can handle, then they're able to deal with it. But if it is sustained or if it increases in magnitude, then appropriate people up the chain of command get invoked and brought into the conversation, so that together either more resources can be deployed, different strategies, maybe someone who's further up the chain is overseeing other similar businesses or pieces within the puzzle, and so you can copy something that was successful over in Department A and move it to Department B, and so, but if it's a small issue, then they're not necessarily, brought in. And so the idea of tiers is just allowing you to have, this pyramid structure that gets you from, to devote your resources where they need to be.
That's great. So I know you talked a little bit about developing that system. Who would you say should get involved with that process?
Well, so we've kind of talked about just alerts and thresholds in general, and then we've also gotten a little more specific with a tier-based setup. And throughout the conversation today, we're going to kind of compare and contrast the two together. They can be done in unison, but they're two segmented pieces. And so when you're asking about getting started, if you're in that situation where you maybe have some reports in place, maybe part of your S&OP process you are reviewing KPIs, but you don't necessarily have those targets or those thresholds, those sorts of things that are going to trip some sort of intervention, maybe between the S&OP meetings. Maybe it's delegated to a point where, hey, when this happens, this should take place. Then when we're going to look at when we get into the live demo, I'm going to kind of walk through, the alerts and thresholds that are built into version 4.8 don't take a lot of pre-planning. They're easy to set up. They're easy to allow an individual to get involved at their own level. Whereas when we get into maybe the more structured table-based system, it's more centralized. You need a lot of pre-planning and kind of setting up what those sorts of things are going to be. In either case, what you're always going to get is a situation where responsibility is clearly defined, that you're going to find a person who is able to take action based on the numbers that you see, and that in either way that you set it up, you're going to be able to tie the level of response to the magnitude of the event. That's where you're going to get value out of this sort of approach. And so what I want to do is kind of walk you through both of these through the software. So we'll get through these slides here in a minute, and we'll dive into the fun of it. But I want to talk at least for a moment about kind of the pros and the strengths of each system, right? So starting with a table-based approach, what you're going to find is in order to set this up, well, first off, it can be used in any version of Archiva, right? You're not bound by having to be in version 4.8 or later. So it's available right now to everyone. It's also very modular in approach, but that comes at a cost because it doesn't require a lot of setting up ahead of time and getting what your thresholds and targets need to be centralized. You're going to need someone to monitor the system, to manage and do maintenance on it as far as keeping the right person involved with the right thresholds when these sorts of things happen. And since it's available in any version and it predates some of the integrations in 4.8, doesn't quite have some of those advanced features like being able to snooze things and being able to follow up actions directly from an email, or that sort of toast pop-up notification that you get. And so this is kind of the bird's eye look at the table editor based approach. And if we dive into a little bit of the details, I want to show you kind of what it would look like. So what you would need to do is you go through your KPIs, right? And for each one of these KPIs, you're going to set up what your tiers are going to be. Now, you have an unlimited number of tiers that you could have, but I suggest people use three or fewer levels. And from your KPIs, you would do sort of this Cartesian product of all the available levels, all the different KPIs, and the points at which that you want to monitor this. And you're going to wind up with this really big table. And within that, you're going to start plug in, at manufacturing plant A for this particular, set of products that we want to make. We have a KPI that is involved, relative to stockouts. And so, we're going to have assign this person responsible if the magnitude of the event is, at this level. And then if it goes to a higher level for that same manufacturing plant, same set of products, now we get second person involved. Conversely, if it's manufacturing plant B, now we've got, and this set of products, another, and so it's a lot of upfront, work and kind of getting that all set up and established. But once you do, you've got this single point of reference where, everything can be maintained. So whether that's strategically advantageous to your company, if you've got the personnel to do that sort of, maintenance is there. On the flip side, when we get to the alerts and notifications, it's very, individual based, ad hoc. Whereas this one, a lot of upfront, setting things up and getting it up and running. And once you do, you're going to eventually get to this point where, hey, I've got my KPI, I've got my different level, and here's what I'm trying to look for, and here's the person responsible. And as you go up the threshold levels, you get more and more people involved in the situation. So in this example, we've got our product stock out that we're looking at, and in the next column here, we're defining what the different levels are for that particular product, and then what that level is defined as. And then you let the system know, is this a situation where, you're comparing percents or raw numbers? Is a bigger number greater than, good, or is a bigger number bad? So that it knows how to process all this. And then, define what level you're looking at. And then lastly, who's the person that's going to be responsible based on the level of the threshold that you're tripping. So in this example here in the purple, we've got Waylon Smithers, is responsible for the customer satisfaction level for Warehouse 1 dealing with, widgets in North America. If it goes beyond that to the next threshold level, then, we get Van Houten gets involved and Waylon Smithers, stays on copy. And so that level of escalation can happen while, you're able to respond to the increasing level of the magnitude. And finally, if you get to that point where that third level is tripped, then Mr. Burns, gets involved and he becomes the designated point of contact for this situation. Before I said you can have as many levels as you want. One of the nice things about keeping it 3 or less is, we've got traffic lights, we've got a lot of culturally built-in, ways of being able to interpret and assess, levels of 3, right? So if something's green, yellow, red, or something like that, you're able to, I think, everyone's got a clear understanding of what's going on in that situation. So that is kind of what the table editor looks like, and so that's available to anyone, right now. But what we have in 4.8 is a built-in notification system.
Yeah, so that's great. I really like the traffic light analogy. That's a good way to look at it, especially when you're constantly firefighting. So you mentioned something about, starting off with 3 KPIs, and that's great, but I imagine that a lot of our listeners probably have a lot of KPIs that they're tracking. Is there a point when you're supposed to pivot from that 3 to, let's say, 5 or 10 or 15?
That's a good question, and I think you and I actually, discussed it a little bit back when I did my KPI talk about, how many is too many, and so the first thing I would say is it's going to, depend on your organization, for one, right? You're going to have your different set of objectives, and within that set of objectives, there's going to be different KPIs that are going to help you measure and your ability to respond and achieve those objectives. If you're looking at adding another one, I always think that is a good time to reassess whether there's one that can be dropped in favor of that. Did you find something that's superior? Because when you continue to add new ones without dropping any old ones off, realistically, you're lessening the amount of time that you can devote to each one, the amount of resources to respond to those situations. So that's one thing to consider. In either situation, when we're dealing with these alerts and thresholds, it's number of KPI agnostic. We can set the system up to have as many as you want. I'm a big advocate on dashboard design of being able to keep things on a single page. When you get horizontal scroll bars coming up in a dashboard and you're having to pan over, or something is on one page and you got to look on another page to tie something together, you're going to lose your audience, you're going to lose the message. And so, and editing is one of the hardest things, right? I do photography a little bit on the side, and culling, your photographs just to, Ann Leibovitz, someone once asked her, how do your photographs turn out so good? And she's like, I don't let people see 99% of the pictures I take, because they're the ones that aren't up to snuff, right? They're not good enough. And so, obviously that's abstract art, but and we're talking about a business here, but you've got a set number of strategic objectives that you're reaching for, right? And so the KPIs, you're measuring those. And so if they're not that important, or they're not the key ones, delegate them to somewhere else. Maybe it's not part of your monthly review. Maybe it's page 2, something that is done kind of ad hoc, or only when a situation warrants it. But to keep your key performance indicators up front. So again, if we talk about the table-based situation where I said, hey, it's centralized, you've got a lot of maintenance. This is a situation where you got to stay on top of those things if KPIs are changing, or if some person's leaving the organization, or people are getting promoted. These sorts of things, you got to keep track of where those thresholds are set up, so you can continue to reevaluate them every year to see if your targets need to move, to see if all that sort of stuff. And so to answer your question, you can add another one if you're able to, but use that as an opportunity to see if there's another one that can be taken away.
Okay, great. So essentially, don't just keep adding. There has to be a process there. Right?
There does. It needs to be it needs to be thoughtful in execution.
Great. I believe you were going to discuss the second approach.
Yeah, so the new stuff, new toys, right? Here we go. The built-in notification system. So some of the advantages to this, it's got some cool subscription features. If you're the recipient of something, of a message, you can snooze on it. You can tie it into the calendar system that we have in place. So there are events that you can tie as follow-up actions. And like you said, Shankara, I think, in your previous seminar, kind of went through those details more specifically. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that. Again, you need to be on version 4.8 or later, because that's when we rolled it out. But the part I want to talk about is the individual maintenance methodology. So since it's right-click driven, anyone can set up their own alerts for themselves. So if you are organizationally in a situation where you may not be able to set up some centralized method of laying out targets for everything and that sort of stuff, but you want to get away from fighting fires, if let the people who are in the software who know their role, who know they've got that particular workbench or report that they're looking at, and they know when the number is not good, they can just, without going through any sort of ticketing system or whatever might be in your organization, they can right click on that and say, I want to set an alert here. I want to know when this number is going to shift, and then they can decide, should the system monitor that hourly? Is it a once a month thing? There's a lot of power in allowing the individual to do that sort of thing. So that's the contrast between the two systems, and you aren't required to pick one or the other. You can roll out both of them, at the same time. You can start with the individual, based one, and use that to kind of drive yourself, towards a centralized system if that's what you're looking for. As far as how to do it, well, of course we'll get into the software here, but you just right-click on a cell that you're looking for, and this little interface pops up where you can. We're looking at the notification. So if you were to get a notification while you're in the software, it comes up here where you can, mark something as read or tie it into an action. But as far as implementing it goes, you just right-click on a cell and you say, I want to add alert, and you can kind of pick, who needs to be notified for it, what are the conditions, and what's the frequency, and then finally what your actions are. And if it's sent out as an email, you can add a link to tie to a specific document so the person can get straight to what they're looking for. And that's kind of an overview of how the built-in notifications looks. I've got some more slides here. So here we are in a workbench, and we're looking at the sales forecast for this third party, this customer shipment type, right? And looking at the particular value in the month of October, if I want to set something up that is, in this particular screenshot, we're in May, but if we're fast forwarding here, 5 months out, this is what we're looking at. You can set an alert. I want to look, 5 months out, and keep an eye on, a particular, number. You can just, if that's what's, what you want to monitor, as an individual, you can set up that alert. And you can set it up not just for yourself, but for others as well, right? So whether you have a super user that you want to task with, setting things up for a lot of people through this method, or whether you just want to, let people have carte blanche on setting up their own, notifications for themselves.
So Justin, before we get into how you would monitor tier-based data, I just had a few questions. One question is around these two methods that you presented. Is there a benefit for using one over the other, or is it just a preference?
It's a preference in that I think, your organization's probably in a situation where one is going to be, better suited for where you are right now than the other one. If you have a well-defined suite of KPIs, you've had them in place, you've been looking at these, reports, and you kind of know where those numbers are, then, a centralized table-based setup might, be the next step to getting ahead of situations before they become emergencies. Conversely, if you're not there yet, if you're transitioning, away from Excel into, your new to Arkiva, and you just want to begin to dabble in it, the alert notification right-click setup is going to be an easy way to experiment a little bit without having to put a lot of upfront effort into, setting things up. You can start small, start with just a single alert, right, just for yourself, and just roll things out, periodically. So I think, everyone knows their own, organization better, so I'm not going to say this one's better than the other one, but these are the different the strengths for each, so you can kind of pick out, where you want to go, or, you can do a little bit of both. There's no reason to not, take both at the same time. So.
Now, what are some of the types of alerts that you can have set up?
Well, going back to the table-based approach, we've got one of the columns we were looking at was defining whether, you're looking at a raw count or a percent, and whether bigger is good or bigger is bad. So with that power, that can unlock whether, you want to see if something is being tripped because, whether, on one hand, it's whether something's, you're not hitting your target, right? So you got your target there, and, at a level 1 level, it's an action item that, someone can take responsibility for, and then when you get to those higher levels, you're needing to, it's turning into a fire, right? That you need to bring in big guns or take larger actions. If your goal is like, forward-looking, I'm trying to think of some good examples here, but I guess, ultimately you're pretty unencumbered as far as what sort of alerts you can be looking for, whether it's stuff that's coming out of your data that is just not in alignment with where your objectives are, right?
Yeah, so with forward looking, I'm guessing some financials, maybe checking where you are now versus the budget, what your projections are.
Oh, certainly. Financials can be a part of this. Data that you are pulling out of your scheduling, stuff that's coming from the sales end, all of this can tie together. Anything that your KPIs are set up to monitor, right? The data's there. You've got your KPIs, so now you can feed that into your alerts. So whatever your objectives are that you're measuring, that you're looking for. So when you look at monitoring your tier-based stuff, you want to set up the appropriate timeline, right? Either situation is going to allow you to do something that's, as frequently as hourly to, monthly or ad hoc. One of the built-in, the right-click alert notifications, there's a manager interface where you can run them right now, right? Just click the button and say, I want to check this immediately. But then, of course, you can set up on a scheduled item. Table editor approach is going to, set up, through SQL jobs, so it's going to, be auxiliarily powered. And so that's how, you're going to be able to monitor stuff at different time sequences for each one.
Okay, so, right. So we talked about prioritizing supply chain plan and tasks, and we did a webinar on this, so I just wanted to share a little bit of that. That webinar was titled How to Create a Supply Chain Performance Monitoring System That Does Not Keep You Up at Night, because, essentially we don't want you stressing out about could possibly go wrong in your supply chain. And you can find the recorded version on the Arkiva website, arkiva.com/webinars. And so we kind of went through this diagram in more detail, but the key thing to remember here from this is that a lot of the times when we're fighting fires, we're focusing on that red box, where it's urgent and important. And of course, that's things that we should look at. But what often happens is that we ignore the not urgent and important because it's not urgent yet. So essentially, what Justin's going to show us today, we're going to look at some things that might be in the not so urgent, but they're important. So you want to really set up your KPIs, tracking all of those things so that as much as possible, you're tackling things when they're important but not urgent, so that you don't have that sense of urgency that you're firefighting and this needs to be fixed and it could possibly disrupt your supply chain. So this is just something that we shared in that webinar. We went through how you can also set up early warning indicators. So as you look through your entire supply chain, we did this root cause analysis so you can figure out what actually happened before the fact. So we have that on our website if you want to check it out, but this is something that Justin's going to show in a little bit. So as you go about setting up your KPIs, just try to think of it not just, what do I have to do now, what's urgent, what's important, but also taking the step back so that you don't always have to firefight.
Awesome. So once you set up your table-based situation, right, where you've got each of your KPIs at each different threshold for each segment of your data within the larger picture, who's responsible for it, and all that sort of stuff, you can turn on, the automation part and allow it to just start monitoring the data. And when it comes back, you get this, fantastic method for looking at the situation you have and assessing, where problems might be. And so this, you can see right now when I was talking about, 3 levels or less, this is where the power of that comes in. Obviously, you do 12 levels, you can have gradations, right? But the traffic light system is something that we all recognize, and as a monitoring situation, it's easy to see, right here, we are looking at, warehouse 1 and up at the top, and for the European market, looking at devices, we've got some situations that maybe looking at the individual reports, it might not have tied it all back together. That you come here in a single place where you can kind of look at it all, and this is going to give you some increased value, right, in just knowing where to put possible resources. So with that, let's transition over to the software, shall we? So let me escape out of here, and I've got version 4.10 of Arqiva that we're going to be looking at. Is it showing up on the right screen? I think so.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So we're going to start with this table-based version here that I've been talking about, where you would set up a lot of stuff ahead of time. And so we've got a single table where each KPI can be entered along with the different levels and all the different columns we've been talking about. And you can see just with a couple of KPIs for a couple different fictitious sets of data, you can see how massive a table like this can become. As far as maintenance goes, when you have it, inside a table editor, you do have access to all of Arqiva's, table editor features to make it a little easier to manage. So if we wanted to isolate on that data and say we wanted to look at, just a specific KPI, we're interested in just our product stock counts, we can cut down the data and filter just to that. And then, within here, we can say, well, let's look at our level 1 items. And so I can come in and drill down. So these are all of our level 1 product stockouts, and you can see, based off of where it is, which warehouse is coming out, what your different tiers are, how you want to define which one is, and then who's going to be, responsible for that, so you can task, the right person with monitoring that. Once that's done, and then we can get over to the monitoring side, right, where we've got the ability to, look at, how things are doing. I've set up a couple pre-made filters up here at the top. Right now we're looking at everything, but, with a larger data set, it still might grow from what we are seeing here. So if we wanted to drill down and say, I only want to look at items where, something's wrong. Now we're filtering out, all those rows where everything was green across the board. And so maybe from a supervisor managerial position, this could be a key way. You open up the software in the morning and you tie this in as, open this report on load. So you start your day, just getting a sense of, where these things are. In addition, because it is alerts, there you can have emails associated with these. Once we're here, each one of these columns, representing each of the different KPIs is a hyperlink that's going to take you over to the specific, dashboard set up to monitor that. So looking at our product stock out here, I see, this yellow that we've tripped for warehouse 1. So we can jump over there, and I got a control click. And so here's our stock out dashboard, right, where we can get into more specific details about what's going on. And so we were looking at warehouse 1, and we can see, the reasons that those things were happening. Maybe it's self-explanatory, total volume of, lost sales from that. And so get into the data that's associated with it. So it's not the end all. This is, this is kind of a mediary, to take the user from, problem to whether it's explanation or whether it's, just, the details, right, of what got you that situation. So we've got all of our dashboards here, tied back to the alert monitoring. And so that's one of the powers that comes from this centralized system. Conversely, if we want to look at the alert system, I'm going to pull up a workbench here. So I'm going to go to my demand management, and I'll just click on Sales Manager Collaboration to get us a workbench with some numbers in it. This right-click alert is available in whether it's a table editor, whether it is a quick report, whether it's a workbench. There's just the option down here, Add Alert. And so when I do that, the first thing I'm presented with is a box where I can kind of choose its name and choose what type it is. I know earlier you were asking a little bit about types of alerts. Within here, we can assign, a variety of designations. Is this something that's routine? Are we putting this in place because, we're going to define this as minor, right? And so we've got the 3 items here, minor, major, critical, again, tie back to that level 1, level 2, level 3 system in the table editor-based approach. Again, that, traffic light, red, yellow, red, yellow, orange type of thing. And then in addition, we found it useful for routine and for maintenance to be available as options in here as well. So a little bit more finesse, in what your choices are versus strictly the threshold-based system in the tiers. So for this one, we're just going to leave this as routine, and of course you can give it a name. It's going to default based off of the object that you have open, but you're free to mock that up and change it however you want. And you've got a free-form text field here where you can add additional information that might be pertinent for whatever it is that you're looking into doing. Below that, there's a link here where we could assign an object, and it doesn't have to be the object that we're assigning the alert to. It could be a drill down, it could be a KP, some sort of dashboard that's going to be an explanation for this, right? So real useful there that the link is not necessarily specific to what's happening with the where you're setting this up. All right. So beyond that, we've been looking at the first tab here, the subscribers, where you can choose who's going to be able to look at. Seems like we've got some construction going on next door, but thankfully one of our marketing teams running over there. So if you hear the hammering, that should cease in a moment. So here you've got all the users as well as the groups that are built into this particular database of the software, and you can choose who you want to be a subscriber to this particular alert. The box up at the top, if you just want to check it and say, I just want this for me. In addition, suppose you were to assign it to a group of people or a handful of individuals. They, as individuals, can choose to opt out, and so they've got an interface on the emails or the alerts that they would receive. And if they say, you know what, this comes up too often, and I'm not part of that group anymore, they can individually opt out. And so I talked about individual, maintenance methodologies. This is an example of that, where it's very decentralized, where individuals can take ownership, individuals can opt out. There's a lot of freedom for people to kind of control their own messages, right? Down at the bottom, 2 options for notifications. There's emails, and there's also the pop-up toast notification. If that's unfamiliar to you, if you have Outlook and you get that little new message pop up that appears down in the corner, that's your pop-up toast. And so that happens inside the software. So if you have users that are in Archiva and the particular threshold happens, they get a little notification that will pop up down there. If we move now from kind of the interface of who's using it and switch over to the conditions, as I do that, it's looking at the data source of what we pulled up and grabbing the context of where we clicked and what we were looking at. And so the cell we were on was the total sales forecast. So it's going to fill this in as much as it can to help us out. And so we're going to say, well, if the sum of the total sales forecast is greater than, and then you could put you can make an expression, compare it to another column. If it's more than 1.2 times this other column, you could evaluate. That way you could have just a straight number. We could come in and say if it's greater than 100,000, whatever math formula that you want to do, we can do that comparison. And so that's going to determine what the conditions are. Now, by default, it loaded up to our default data source here, and it took into account, the context of where we were clicking. We can fine tune this. We can come in and say, well, I want to delete, this particular channel. I know I right click there, but that part isn't important to me. Or we can come in and we can add, additional filters as well. So it's the same filter interface as the filter screen. So a lot of power there. And lastly, the frequency up here, we can come in, do we want to do it hourly? If we do it weekly, do we want it every day of the week, Monday through Friday? Do we want to do it every single week, or, all those typical, scheduling, functionalities down here. You've got an end date down there if you want to put that in, etc. Basically everything you'd see in Outlook if you were trying to set up a meeting, you've got that same sort of interface. So when you're all done with that, so set that up for just me, and I'm going to call this my happy little sales warning. So with that in mind, now it's there, it's in place. And if I want to come back later and monitor it, if I want to make changes to it, that's done from the Manage Alerts option here. So within the collaborators here, here's my new one we just made. My happy little sales warning is right there. But we can also see the other alerts that I've made. We can toggle off my alerts and see, because I'm an administrator here, I've got the power to see other alerts as well in here. We can get into the specifics and modify one if you want to manage it. And so we can come in and maybe make a change to what the condition is or the frequency. That's can all be handled right there. But as an individual, even without being a super user or administrator, if that person's using a report and they see a number and I want to change that, or I want to be aware of where this one is relative to that, or if it's more than a certain number, it's there. Within And then again, within the software, we've got this notification tab down here that, like I said, just appears in version 4.8 and later, where you can get a history, right, of what those thresholds are, and it ties into the calendar system that we have for scheduling events, for the SNOP calendar that's there. So really powerful way to simply be able to start your alert thresholds. So if you've got the time and the resources and you want to go to that centralized table where you have you're creating a dashboard, in essence, a dashboard of dashboards, that high level, here's where things are going well, here's where things are not. Or if you want to have this ad hoc, I want this group of people to be alerted when this condition happens, you can do it without all this, centralized maintenance. Two different ideas, both heading towards that same goal of moving you away from fighting fires and getting you back into a daily routine that doesn't give you ulcers. At this point, I guess, questions from the audience? I know we've got a little bit of time left here.
Yeah, so I'm going to be looking at that in a minute. But, I like your comment about your sample, which is happy little sales warning. Maybe we should have that for everything. Happy little forecast warning. Or
can we put emojis in here?
Like that.
Put emojis in the titles of our documents.
Yeah, that's even if it's like something that's super urgent and you're freaking out, you still get a positive feeling, right? I think that might be the way to go.
Whoopsies, we have a fire.
Yeah, so just some key takeaways that I took from everything that we've talked about so far. I believe it's essential to understand the value of just creating fear-based threshold systems. So essentially the core of it has to do with assigning the right responsibilities, right? So you don't want everybody firefighting everything because that's not productive.
Yeah.
So just having that traffic light system, I really like that, and which helps you figure out, what's red, what's green, what's yellow, and just having the system color-coded in that way also helps because visually you can see what's going on with your system. And then you also discussed two main approaches that we use at Arqiva, and that's the table editor that automates things. And then we also have the inbuilt solution, which is Arqiva Pulse Alerts and Notifications. And essentially, if you have the right version of the software, if you do not have the right version of the software, you can contact your practice director and maybe start talking about an upgrade. So I'll just put that shameless plug in there. But so essentially, that's something that's available to most users today. They can just go in, start playing around, setting things up to really create a system where they can start monitoring things before it's really imminent. And then finally, we also talked about prioritizing supply chain planning tasks. Really just making sure that you focus on things before they are critical. So now we're going to open it up to questions. But I do want to mention that because this was a sample, if you're an Arqiva customer or you're not an Arqiva customer and you want to see something that's a bit more customized to you, because every system is going to be different, every company is different, their KPIs are different, you can simply, if you're an Arqiva customer, just reach out to your practice director and we can have that set up. But if you're not an Arqiva customer, just go to our website and request for a demo. We'll be more than happy to create something that's a bit more customized to your particular system. And while we wait for some questions to come in, I can also talk about the fact that we have some webinars coming up. This webinar is going to be up on our website. So usually we put it up about 2 days after the webinar. When you go to our website, you can find the recording, and feel free to share it with your colleagues as well. Our next webinar is going to be about, where should you build your new warehouse? So we're going to be talking a little bit about that as well. And now I'm just going to check to see, Justin, if we have some questions.
While we're waiting, I'll just say if you go with a centralized space system, if you're doing that and you find yourself waking up in the morning and everything's green, then it's actually time to revisit your thresholds, right? If you're not seeing room for improvement, right? We've been talking about fighting fires, but sometimes these are not necessarily what you quote unquote call fire, but a situation where you can be striving for better, right? And so so often you put a target in place and then forget about it, or just assume it's still accurate, right? When the world's changing fast. And so if you set this up and you find everything's green, then go back and don't pop a cork of champagne and celebrate. I mean, do, but then revisit your targets and see if you can make those maybe more challenging, right?
So we have a question here that so essentially, we talked about this. So what the person wants to know is that we've discussed this. We showed the Arkiva solution. It looks like it's geared towards someone who already has a plan and solution in place. What do you do if you just have Excel? You're using Excel right now. Is there anything that you can do?
If you're still using Excel, I'm trying to think if there's a way to take this methodology and approach it, outside of, one of the beautiful things about our Arkiva is even if, whether you're doing the ad hoc system or the centralized, you're still running off of a central, database, right, where everything is drawing it together. And with things like SharePoint and, these cloud-based, Microsoft's really pushing, all their stuff towards the cloud, and there's those means of collaborating, in real time in cloud-based environments. There are ways where, as a group of people, monitoring can be set up. As an individual, just within Excel itself, or some sort of, your own individual software, you're in a desktop situation where you're not, on a network where you're, collaborating in real time or something like that. Certainly the Excel's got, the capabilities to put in, macros that would simulate, this sort of stuff. And I imagine, a couple Google searches might get you a long ways towards not having to reinvent the wheel and do it yourself. You're going to miss out on, some of the email and other features that are going to come, from Arkiva. But hope is not lost, right? If you're looking to do something right away, there are opportunities. I can't point to anything specifically off the top of my head, but thinking about what I know about macros in Excel, I think you'd be surprised how far you can get on an individual level.
Yeah, and then the real marketing answer is just get a system like Arkiva. Okay, so I think that's all the time that we have for questions. I want to thank you once again, Justin, for taking the time to discuss this topic, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.